Cloning has been used in movies for decades, and has been used for more than a few plot lines, twists, and arguably some of the best stories. The basic version uses 2 different shots of the same person, without moving the camera. Overlay your footage, crop the top layer, and feather out the blend. As long as none of your characters cross that invisible line, it sells the illusion of being in 2 places at once. But what about those times when you want to get a little more elaborate to really sell the effect? What if, say, you wanted to pass an object to yourself? Something that's physically impossible to do. How would you do such a shot? Well, that's what I spent the last few weeks trying to figure out. I figured with enough planning and enough practice, it should be possible to pull off a shot that was believable. I mean, how hard could it be? First step was planning everything out. I wrote down a brief sequence of events, some dialogue, and approximately how long each interaction would take. I did this for all 3 characters in my scene, lined them side by side, just to see how everything would play out. The premise was pretty basic. Character 1 takes the mug, hands it off to character 2 slides it to character 3, and character 3 walks behind character 1. I knew there would be a few hurdles. One was lighting. From experience, I knew shooting during changing lighting conditions will completely ruin the effect. So I chose to shoot around noon to make sure the light wasn't going to dramatically change on me. The other big problem was actually passing off the mug. I grabbed a hose reducer I had laying around because it matched the color of my mug, which I was hoping would help rotoscoping later. And I shot a few seconds of clean plate to replace the masked out portion. I set some additional lighting. I used some painter's tape to mark the character zones to mitigate any crossover problems. I set up the mics and prepared a quick wardrobe change. I even packed a laundry basket in case I overshot my mark for the slide. It was go time. I shot the clean plate, I did all 3 character interactions, I did a dozen takes or so to make sure I had at least one good one. Because I was using a mug as the prop, it meant that the placement had to be perfect. I couldn't just put my hand in the air and hope that I would magically sync with the next character, hence the prop holder. If I accidentally moved the mug or messed up the slide, I would have to start all over again. Or worse, find a new mug. Once everything was done, I loaded up the footage into Resolve to see what I had. First step was just to align everything and do a simple crop to make sure there were no major issues. It all looked pretty promising, so the next step was to start actually merging the footage. I needed to mask out the first character until the second character had the mug, and then move the mask from the second character onto the mug to complete the transition. And that's when it became clear I'd forgotten something very important: shadows. There was no way for me to adjust the shadows behind the cup. The color difference was just too much. I also ran into an issue with the clean plate. I tried to keyframe some color adjustment, but ultimately I decided it would just be easier to shoot everything at night in more controlled lighting conditions. I set up everything as before and swapped the reducer for clear coat glass to eliminate any issues with the shadows. I was pretty certain I had it at this point, and after reviewing the footage, the extra lighting on the back wall really helped to eliminate the lighting issue I had before. And then I noticed something. The island that I was shooting at had a lot of reflection and shadows. It just wasn't going to work. So at this point, I had been shooting for, I don't remember how many days. It was probably over the course of 4 different days. I had dozens of takes, and I had no idea how I was going to fix this lighting issue. There were shadows coming in when there weren't supposed to be. There were shadows not there when they should have been. I thought about just scrapping the video and just moving on, but I had worked so hard on this. I really wanted something to come out. So after a few days of working on the footage and just coming up with nothing, a thought occurred to me. If the idea behind a clean plate is to remove an object when it shouldn't be there, what if I did the opposite with the shadows? What if I filmed them like they were there when I was not actually in that position to cast those shadows? I ran through the whole routine without any of the stuff in it. Instead of 3 shots in the clean plate, I had an additional 3 shots for the shadows. And it worked. It worked. I was pretty ecstatic. The shadows looked believable, the footage lined up. I also swapped to a new prop holder, one that didn't sit on the island so it wouldn't interfere with anything. It also wasn't as rigid as the glass, so I was hoping that there would be a little bit more movement in the handoff and make it look a little more believable. Now I was on the home stretch. Now I was getting somewhere. Now, after all this time, I was back to square one. Not once during any of my planning or any of my shooting did I think I'm going to walk right in front of the prop holder. Now the easy way out would just be cut the video short and forget that part of the footage, but I had worked so hard on this that I didn't want to give up. So, once more onto the breach. One more time. Uno más. New plan. If the prop holder's the issue, what if the prop holder was only there when I needed it? There's a neat little tool in Resolve called Smooth Transition. It works a little bit like optical flow. If you have a clip and cut out a piece of it, it'll try and smooth out the frames between your 2 clips so that it doesn't look like there's a cut at all. If there's not a lot of movement, it works really well. So I redid the shoot, this time doing my best statue impression while my wife set and removed the prop stand. A few takes later, and that was it. Succeed or fail, I had to put this project to rest. It was a moment of truth. I hadn't looked at the footage yet. I was hoping that one of the takes would be good. To pull this off, the smooth cut had to work. Everything was riding on it. Luckily, there was one good take with no issues, so I got to editing. Fusion was giving me some problems, so I broke up my clips into sections and made Fusion comps out of the different sections and parts that I needed. I used a grid warp to make the handoff less stiff and more realistic. I did a boatload of masking, more than I ever care to do again, and I had layers upon layers just to make sure everything blended. It was done, but did it work? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, whose mug is it anyway? Oh,
I think that's yours. Oh, no. It's definitely yours. Oh, you can drink that stuff. I'm getting a new cup.
So did I pull off the impossible shot? Not quite. I got really close though. Here's a few issues, and you probably noticed them too. The handoff is a little janky. That's my fault. I cut out some of the footage because it took too long for me to actually grab the mug. My fingers were just hovering in front of it, I didn't actually have it in my hand, and I was twiddling my fingers for some odd reason. So that was just bad acting on my part. The other big issue is the walk behind. Because there's so much contrast between my shirt and the door, I really had to move the mask in to get rid of the glow. This left a really sharp, unnatural edge. I did what I could to blur the edge. It can be done, but I'm honestly not that great at it. So I did what I could and I left the rest. So here are the big takeaways. If you're going to shoot something like this, make sure you're not near a wall or complex geometry. Some of the shadows were really bad. They were the natural shadows, but they made it look like there was a bad blend job. The lighting on the door handle, the real shadows made my footage look fake. So if you're going to shoot on a wall, make sure it's a flat wall and make sure there's not a lot of movement. Also stay away from reflective surfaces. I locked myself in trying to do the cup slide. If I had known there would be such an issue, I would have found a darker surface or reworked the shot. Because I wanted to slide the cup, I couldn't use a tablecloth or mess with the surface in any other way. But how would you have done this shot? What would you have done differently? How would you have set it up? I'm curious to know. Comment below. And if you're curious about other VFX I've tried, check out that video there. Thanks again, and until next time, make something awesome.